Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove, here today with another Omnibus review. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the recently released New Mutants Omnibus Volume 2. Now, this is one that is a very exciting addition to the collection for me, a book I'm really glad to finally see released. I had to wait quite a while for this one, it seems like, with all the numerous delays that affected this, and obviously other books have been affected by delays too in recent times. But this was also an instance where the DM variant cover, which you see here, this Arthur Adams cover, really nice piece of artwork, came out about 3 weeks or 4 weeks after the standard variant. So I know that some people will already have had this book for a while, but me being such a big Arthur Adams fan, had to hold out that bit longer to get this particular cover. But it's worth it in my opinion, and I've obviously finally got it here now, so that's the main thing. So I'll take a look at it today, give an overview of the book, and share some thoughts on the material in here. So I will give a bit of a spoiler warning, just in case you haven't read this stuff and don't want to have anything spoiled. Not that I intend to go through everything, because you know there's a lot of stuff in here to talk about. I'm not going to cover it all, but just fair warning. First thing I'll just point out then, obviously already mentioned, beautiful Arthur Adams artwork here. You're also seeing that being used on the hardcover itself as a wraparound image. Really nice though. I like the design of these dust jackets for both the first volume and the second volume, with this kind of mostly white design with these black, almost like ink splotches just kind of thrown across there. Looks really nice. It's a very unique design, quite unlike any other omnibuses I've seen. On the spine we get the New Mutants logo, which has changed from volume 1, and I'll show the difference in a second. And at the bottom, this really cool Rick Leonardi image of Magic, which I think is really nice. Magic is my favourite character from this era of New Mutants, so cool to see her front and centre there. And on the back, we got the cover gallery and a bit of blurb and contents, etc. So Magneto takes charge. During this era of New Mutants, Magneto is the headmaster of Xavier's school, with Professor X having basically left Earth and left the whole X-Men franchise as of issue 200 of Uncanny X-Men. And he was mostly absent for the next 75 issues of that series. He would show up now and again for small appearances, but for the most part, there was a long period of time where Xavier was absent. Now, just before I take a look at the book itself, I just want to compare the difference of the text logo for the spines of these two books, because I mentioned they were different. So we see volume 1 there on the top, and then the second volume there. Basically, the series logo changed. So it started out as the one we see on the top there. At some point during the material in volume 1, I want to say around issue 26, they updated it to the one we're seeing on this second volume dust cover. And I actually think they look really cool next to each other. Even though they are different, they also kind of match in style. So they look good next to each other on the shelf, in my opinion at least. So then, let's take a look at the hardcover itself now, without further ado. So we're seeing this same Arthur Adams image from the DM cover. This is the cover of the New Mutants Special Edition, issue 1, which is actually part of a two-part crossover with an X-Men annual, and it is the first story collected in here. And as we take a look inside, firstly, you're going to be met with this bright yellow bookend page. This is the same, again, as used in the first volume. The whole style of the interior design and everything really matches that first volume really well. They did a good job of making this a matching set in almost every way. As we open the book here, another Rick Leonardi image, Magic in her semi-demon child form, dark child form, I mean, with Magneto in his good guy costume. We've got the creators here. Obviously, Chris Claremont writes the main chunk of New Mutants in here. This book actually collects the rest of his run as the main writer on New Mutants. Then we get some work by Louise Simonson, who took over the series from Claremont, Ann Nocenti, Joe Duffy, and Tom DeFalco, and a lot of pencilers and inkers in here. Honestly, as you can see here, just a huge list of names, some very big recognizable names: Arthur Adams, Bob McLeod, Rick Leonardi, Keith Pollard, Alan Davis, Brett Blevins, Kevin Nolan, just to name a few. Bill Sienkiewicz and a lot of great inkers as well. Terry Austin, one of the all-time great inkers. And as well, there's a little disclaimer down here as well. I don't know if you can really see that too clearly on here, but it basically, you see this now in some books and also on some TV shows and films as well, on streaming services, etc. basically saying this previously published content includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures. Specifically, this also highlights that there are examples and depictions of sexual assault and suicide. Reader discretion advised. I don't think there's anything in here that's too kind of egregious or offensive, but nowadays, you know, they're playing it safe and obviously just trying to cover their backs, I suppose, against things like that. You've got to try and make it clear as to what your content includes, I suppose. The contents page, that really cool design again, that black and white design, I'm a big fan of that. And then we jump into the the Arthur Adams issue, as I call it. Just beautiful artwork in here, I tell you. This is the New Mutants Special Edition, issue 1, although there's only one issue of it. And this is part of a, as I said, 2-part crossover story with the X-Men, and it takes place primarily in Asgard. So we see a lot of Asgardian characters, Loki, the Enchantress, and all this artwork here is by the incredible Arthur Adams, who does just a great job. And we start out with a beach scene with the New Mutants just having some R&R time, and they are quickly swept up into an adventure. Now, as of the end of the first volume, we had seen the character of Karma, seen here in particular. She had been possessed by the Shadow King. Whilst he'd been in control of her body, he had basically made her gain all this weight, and she'd become very big. During this story, we see her regain her, I suppose you could say, her usual form. She loses all the weight through a bit of Asgardian magic, and that is how she returns to her more recognisable appearance, back to her usual self. This artwork, though, in here, this Arthur Adams work, is just beautiful stuff. I mean, almost every panel and every page, just beautiful to look at, stunning. Illyana gets captured by the Enchantress. This is a really cool story. Honestly, I try not to discuss it all in too much detail, or I'll be here all day. But this is honestly a lot of fun. This is also the story where we see Danny Moonstar, become a Valkyrie. She gains one of the Valkyrie's magical winged horses. And she gains, I think it's called the Death Sight, where she has the Valkyrie's ability to see a kind of hanging skull, like a Grim Reaper type figure, above anybody who is at risk of imminently dying, which becomes something that can be of both benefit and a bit of a curse to her going forward from this point onwards. But then we get the X-Men Annual 9, so to say this is a crossover issue, so this continues the story. I think there's also a section in here where Storm gains Thor's powers. She becomes a goddess of thunder, long before Jane Foster had that honour. Not that it lasts very long, but it's a cool moment. And yeah, honestly, it's just a lot of great stuff. This whole Claremont run of New Mutants, so everything collected really in the first and second volumes, I think is well worth checking out if you haven't already read it before. I found it to be really enjoyable. So as of the end of that series, then we go back into the main series now. There is a bit of blurb here, just doing a quick recap of the events of Uncanny X-Men issue 200 to basically explain why Magneto is now in charge. Initially, we are still seeing Bill Sienkiewicz doing some artwork here. I think he's only inking it though. I think Mary Wilshire was the main penciler here, but nevertheless, with Sienkiewicz involved, he's still giving it a very distinctive look. And I obviously talked more about his work in the first volume, where most of his run is featured. But Sienkiewicz brought a really great style to this book. I think during the issues which he worked on as artist, happened to be the issues that the series really hit its stride and really got going into full gear. And it stays great after that as well. But I don't think anyone else really took over the book and gave it as unique a look as Sienkiewicz did. I mean, maybe Brett Blevins did. He's also got a very unique style. But it's a very different style to Sienkiewicz. And I think it's maybe a slightly more divisive one. Anyway, so what sort of stuff we're seeing in here? Well, obviously plenty of adventures that the team go on. They're supposed to be studying and working, and Magneto is doing his absolute best to be the mentor that they need. But it's not a role that comes naturally to him, so we often see Magneto having these internal struggles. He's not a kind of natural teacher figure like Charles Xavier was, and he fully recognizes that, but nevertheless does his best to fulfill the promise he made to Charles to look after these kids. There is a crossover with the Secret Wars 2 event, which is honestly the weakest part of the book. I think that's actually what we're seeing here. Yeah, we see the stuff here crossing over with that event. Secret Wars 2 was just a drag to me, honestly. I don't enjoy it. Secret Wars 1 is okay, I think mostly because it was largely self-contained. But with the second one, they just insisted on having it cross over with almost everything. And I just think that the Beyonder as a character and this whole thing really just overstays its welcome for the most part. It killed the pacing of the story for me a little bit with these issues crossing over with that. But something drastic does happen, I'll say. The New Mutants technically die, sort of. They like immediately come back to life, you know, in a typical comic book kind of way. But they come back kind of changed, you know, death sort of changes them, as it would. And they kind of act like these sorts of, like they've lost all their personality. They're just kind of sort of walking around like almost mindless zombie type characters. There's a hell of a cover right there. The New Hellions with the White Queen, Emma Frost front and center. Cool artwork here by Keith Pollard. The Hellions, for those maybe not too aware, are these kids here, and what happens here, if I'm trying to remember as I'm talking about it, because the New Mutants were so badly affected by their encounter with the Beyonder, Magneto was at a loss as to how to help them, and in desperation turned to Emma Frost and her Massachusetts Academy, the place that she runs, where the Hellions all are based. They are basically the New Mutants equivalent for the Hellfire Club. And yeah, Emma Frost kind of takes them on as students and does her best to help them out. Luckily, they do regain their usual selves, their personalities, pretty quickly. There's a pretty fun altercation here with the Avengers as well, where Magneto ends up getting into a fight with them. They still think he's a villain. They don't know he's trying to turn over a new leaf, but he's actually only trying to look out for his students. A lot of great artwork in here. I really love, in general, you know, this kind of 80s Marvel style. Well, obviously a lot of artists worked for Marvel during that decade, but overall I just think artwork from that decade for Marvel in particular is really cool. Here we see the artwork of Jackson Geiss. There is no bad artist that works on this series, I will tell you that, in my opinion. You know, there's some I prefer to others. Some artwork in here, like the Arthur Adams issue, you know, is probably my highlight issue, my absolute favourite. But everything in here honestly looks really good. The Hellions, yeah, they keep coming back. There's like a constant rivalry between these two teams. They get into these little fights now and then. And there's a couple of solo issues as well. Not that many, but I think there's an issue that focuses primarily on Cannonball, Sam Guthrie. Like, he goes home and spends some time with his family, and so does Danny Moonstar. And it is cool to get a bit of an opportunity like that to explore more of these characters', I suppose, backgrounds and a bit more of their personal lives. Because you don't get too much of an opportunity to do that, I think, in most team books, you know, in a typical issue, because you've got to give everybody kind of equal attention, I suppose, to an extent. There isn't that much time to dive into an individual character's backstory all the time, so it's nice when writers kind of stop and take an opportunity to do that. This is a story that features the return of Legion, who is you know, Charles Xavier's son, and a character that I really don't enjoy very much. So yeah, whenever he crops up, it's usually not one of my favourite stories. Another Arthur Adams issue here though. Again, great to see. So this is Web of Spider-Man Annual 2. It's just a huge collection of stuff in here, honestly. It's a big book, as I mentioned. And I'm just kind of stopping and staring at the Arthur Adams work at the minute. Can't really help myself. New Mutants Annual 2. Alan Davis. Alan Davis, really great artist as well, because he was working on, well, he worked on a lot of things, but what kind of comes to mind for me, anyway, is his work on Excalibur. I think this is actually the issue where Psylocke turns up, though, for the first time. And then she kind of starts hanging around the the Xavier mansion, and ultimately, of course, ends up joining the X-Men themselves. But Alan Davis, really great artist. Don't have too many books collecting his work. I don't have the Excalibur Omnibus, for example. I would like to change that, but that book is, who knows, hard to find. I think overall, as you go through these issues and you go through this run in general, Claremont was really just having the team kind of, the individual characters of the New Mutants. They were, all developing their powers, becoming more confident with their powers, and the team start to become more independent. Definitely, I think I already mentioned, rebelling against Magneto as the authority figure who's supposed to be in charge. Oh yeah, this was the Barry Windsor Smith cover for the standard variants. That's issue 47. He doesn't do the artwork in here though. This is Jackson Geiss. And of course, Magic. Got to talk a little bit about her. As I mentioned, she's my favourite character in this series. I think her story arc is the most fascinating ever since the beginning of it, really, in that 4-part Magic miniseries, which is one of my favourite stories. It's just fantastic. It's tragic and dark and quite horrible, really, but it's a really effective story. And nice little homage here to Days of Future Past. Yeah, this is where the team, they get split up and they end up going to a couple of different possible alternate futures, neither of which are particularly good. There's one where it's almost the Days of Future Past future. In fact, it could well be that same future, can't remember, where Sentinels are hunting every mutant down and most of them are dead. There's another one here where I think it's Sam and Danny end up going to this kind of dystopian future where mutants have taken over. So mutants are in charge, they've made themselves the superior race, and humans are literally living a level below in this kind of undercity. And then they all come back kind of traumatized. It's that classic kind of how do we stop those futures from coming to pass? At the same time, Magic, she is dealing with a lot of drama and developments in Limbo, which is currently, during all this time, she's the ruler of Limbo. She's the kind of sorceress in charge of it. It's her realm. And she's dealing as well with her kind of continuing sort of turn to the dark side, you could say. That continuous struggle that she has to give into the dark power that she has inside of her as a result of what happened way back in the Magic miniseries. As I'm flicking through here, I'm seeing events coming thick and fast. This is where Warlock's dad, Warlock being the kind of techno-organic member of the team, an alien life form, and he's been on the run from his evil, crazy, psychopathic dad who wants to kill him. So this kind of issue, this is the big confrontation where the Magus, as he's called, finally comes up for a big showdown, and the New Mutants have to fight him after having been on the run from him for a while. Okay, so then what happens? This is when Professor X makes a brief return. The team effectively go and essentially they've gone to find him. They've ended up with him on his ship in space. He's hanging around with the Starjammers, the space pirates. So he's briefly back in the series, but he's all set to go home. As the New Mutants leave, he's going to go with them, but then he decides he has to stay. And that's that. And he wouldn't, in fact, really return for quite some time still after this. It's just a really fun era, though. As I say, the whole Chris Claremont era. I think this is the Rick Leonardi issue. Well, I think there's 2 or 3 issues by him. Yeah, I'm sure this is his work. I like the kind of demonic armor that spawns onto Magic whenever she uses her powers. Yeah, this is that cool panel that they used in the opening page of the book. This is quite interesting, though. Illyana's struggling with her powers. She kind of confides in Magneto, and he sort of reassures her and he's able to calm her down. So she gains a bit more of a trust and respect for him for a while than the other members of the team do. So then you've got this Fallen Angels miniseries as well, which is included in here because for a while, Roberto da Costa and Warlock both kind of leave the team. They go off on an adventure. So they're absent from New Mutants for a while, and this series, this miniseries, showcases where they went to. But it's an 8-issue miniseries, and that's quite long. It's not the best story. It's not terrible or anything, but I don't know. It kind of went on a little bit long for me. But, it's good to have it in here, obviously for the sake of completionism. Shows you what these characters are up to during this time. It's definitely a pretty wild adventure. The Devil Dinosaur here, and Moon Boy. Some of Jack Kirby's, probably arguably lesser known creations, I would say. I think it was a very short series, wasn't that? The original Devil Dinosaur series, like just 8 or 9 issues, I think, in the mid-70s. But it's a lot of cool stuff, and hopefully, as you can see, I mentioned it's a big book. We're nearly 1,000 pages into it now, and still quite a big chunk to go. When you include the extras in the back, at least. Yeah, so this is Doug Ramsey, Cypher. He's kind of Warlock's best friend. He's a member of the team. He is, quote-unquote, the useless member of the team. At least that's how he feels about himself, and I suppose sort of how the others subconsciously feel about him, because he doesn't have any powers that are of use in combat. He's no real good in a fight. His whole thing is he's got the mutant ability to be able to very rapidly understand and learn any language, whether it's spoken or written. Which, has its uses, of course, but not when you're getting into one of the many fights that they get into. Anyway, in this issue, there's this whole suggestion that he's maybe been infected by the virus, what's it called? The transmode virus, that's it, I think. That Warlock's race can infect living beings with and basically turn people into one of them. This artwork, I'm pretty sure now, is Brett Levin's. If I can just go back and double check. Although I'm like 90% sure anyway, but no, I'm wrong. It's still Rick Leonardi, inked by Terry Austin. But it's very cool, really nice. And I've always said Terry Austin, when he inks somebody, can always make the work look better. And here's Sal Buscema and Terry Austin. I think this is where Karma leaves the team. She needs to go off and look for her younger siblings who've been missing for a while. Then we've got initial power pack. Louise Simonson, I think she created this series or co-created this series. And John Bogdanove doing the artist. Power pack, you know, never a series that really did it for me, to be honest. It's these superpowered kids. And I mean literally kids, not kids like the New Mutants are kids, like not teenagers, like actually little kids. But never really did it for me, you know. I know it's kind of got its fans, this classic series, but I've just never been able to really get into it. I don't know. Then this is an interesting inclusion in here, the 4-issue limited series Firestar, featuring Firestar, would you believe? I think she'd first appeared in a Spider-Man cartoon, wasn't it? Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, or something like that. And then, you know, quickly brought over into the comics. And she's in here because, well, some of the New Mutants are in here, and X-Men related characters. But I've not read this Firestar miniseries before, so that's something that I'll need to check out. And then I think the last thing that's included in here is the 2019 story by Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz, War Children. Yeah, here it is, included as a kind of bonus story thrown in at the back. And again, it tells you here kind of what it's about. Published in 2019, so obviously long after the original material collected in here. But yeah, Claremont and Sienkiewicz reunited and told a story set during the era of their original run together. So this is a story to be inserted somewhere in that original continuity. And it's definitely cool to see Sienkiewicz's more modern artwork compared to the artwork he was doing, you know, decades ago. There's obviously definitely similarities. He's obviously the same artist, but it just looks slightly more modern, of course. But it's a pretty cool story. You know, it's got that kind of horror vibe to it that Sienkiewicz brought to his issues on the series, which I really liked. I mean, this is just really cool. Really nice page. It's a cool story, you know. And another good inclusion to throw in here, because they could have not included this, and I don't think anybody would have been too frustrated by that. But cool that they decided to put it in. So then we move on to extras in the back, and we've got a lot of different variant covers and interviews. Obviously, you know, this has not been a complete analysis of all the content in here, but even so, you know, it's unavoidably kind of turned into a pretty long video. I couldn't help but show it off in a fair amount of detail, so I can only imagine how long I would have to talk about this to really cover everything. These cool kind of character profiles in the back. Featuring all the various characters and other supporting characters. That's a nice little image, gotta say. Legion, honestly. Has anybody ever had goofier looking hair than Legion? Looks like Paul Phoenix from Tekken. I don't know if that's a reference that too many people will get, but that's what it reminds me of anyway. That kind of bizarre, super gelled up looking hair. Really like that. Really cool image there, magic. That's pretty cool. Mary Wilshire artwork. I think that was included in one of the X-Men omnibuses as well, maybe volume 4. Maybe not. The Asgardian Wars, Arthur Adams cover. And it looks like you get some extra sketches in the back here by Arthur Adams. Here. And all through here. Really nice. These are really nice pencils. Really cool to see the original work like this, especially when it's by, you know, a top artist. Yeah, really cool bonus section, actually. There's quite a lot in it. But yeah, so that is that. And that's quite an in-depth and hopefully useful overview look at this book. It's definitely a recommendation from me. Both this and Volume 1 I think are well worth reading. Interestingly, beyond this, the series will carry on, depending on how you want to collect this. If you want to do it in omnibuses, the best way to do this at the moment will be to pick up the Fall of the Mutants omnibus, which is coming out in a couple of months. And then also the Inferno prologue and the Inferno omnibuses. Collect the next kind of subsequent run of issues following on from here that start to run into Louise Simonson's run. No word yet on if they might do a New Mutants Omnibus Volume 3 as an alternative to buying those crossover omnibuses, if you maybe didn't want to buy all of those. But what I will say anyway, in my opinion, is that as of the end of this book, the material in here, basically when Simonson took over the book from Claremont, and I don't know who else might share this opinion, but I really don't think the series was as strong when she was writing it, which is not to say that it was terrible, but it just kind of became this really strange book with lots of weird, quirky, almost novelty characters and concepts being introduced. So, you know, for me overall, I think the stronger half of the series is the first half that was written by Claremont. And certainly after the Inferno event, once that's over and done with, the rest of the run really didn't feel very strong at all to me. And ultimately, of course, not too long after that, it would be given to Rob Liefeld and turned into X-Force. So, yeah, I think clearly there was a lack of popularity for it at that time. But anyway, back to this book. It's a great book to have, a really good omnibus collection, and one I'm very pleased to see in my collection, as I mentioned. I hope that this was a useful overview. Let me know your thoughts on the run. If you've already checked this stuff out, let me know how you liked it. Let me know if you plan on picking up the book or just anything else that you really want to share. I'm always happy to hear from you guys. But thanks for watching. If you've made it all the way through this one, I know it's been a pretty long one. I appreciate the support as always, and I'll be back again soon to discuss something else.